He was just a hungry 12-year-old boy with one plate of food, but instead of eating it, he gave it away to strangers in need. What happened the next day at his door will leave you speechless. The cafeteria was alive with the sound of lunchtime chatter. Forks clinked against trays, laughter echoed across the room, and the smell of warm food drifted through the air. Kids crowded around tables, trading snacks and telling jokes. But at the far end, away from the noise and chaos, sat Jamal. Jamal was just 12 years old, but life had forced him to grow up faster than most of his classmates. He wasn't the kind of kid who joined in the laughter or pushed his way to the front of the lunch line. He had learned the value of patience, of waiting, of sacrifice. His family didn't have much. His mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, and there were nights when dinner was nothing more than a slice of bread or a bowl of watered-down soup. That day, though, was different. On Jamal's tray sat a plate of food that felt like a small blessing. A piece of golden brown chicken, a scoop of rice, and a soft bread roll. It wasn't fancy, but to Jamal it looked like a feast. His stomach rumbled as he stared at the tray, and for a moment, he forgot about the struggles waiting for him at home. Just as he picked up his fork, movement near the entrance caught his attention. An elderly couple walked slowly into the cafeteria. They clearly didn't belong there. The man's hair was thin and gray, and he leaned heavily on a cane. The woman, with tired eyes and a frail frame, pressed a hand to her stomach as though trying to quiet its hunger. Their clothes were worn and a little shabby, and their faces carried the weary look of people who had gone too long without a proper meal. Jamal watched closely as they approached the counter. The cafeteria worker looked confused at first, then shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said firmly. "Meals are only for students and staff. If you don't have money, I can't serve you." The couple exchanged a glance. The old man tried to protest softly, explaining they hadn't eaten all day, but the answer remained the same. No money, no food. With visible disappointment, they turned to leave, their shoulders heavy with defeat. The man's cane tapped the floor with each slow step, and the woman's eyes glistened with unspoken pain. Jamal felt a lump in his throat. He glanced down at his tray again, the warm chicken, the rice, the bread roll. His stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since yesterday. He needed this food. But as he looked back at the couple, a deeper voice inside whispered that they needed it even more. Without thinking twice, Jamal stood. His tray shook a little in his hands as he walked across the noisy cafeteria. Every step felt heavier, not because of doubt, but because of the weight of his choice. He stopped in front of the couple, who looked surprised to see a boy blocking their path. "Please," Jamal said softly, his voice steady but gentle. He lifted his tray toward them. "You need this more than I do." For a moment, the cafeteria fell silent. Conversations quieted, and dozens of eyes turned toward the small boy with the big heart. The woman's eyes filled with tears, and her lips trembled as she tried to speak. The old man's hand shook as he accepted the tray. He looked at Jamal as though seeing something pure and rare in a world that had shown him mostly hardship. "Bless you, son," the man whispered, his voice cracked but sincere. Jamal nodded, forcing a small smile, though his stomach twisted with hunger. He had given up the only meal he might have had all day, but somehow he felt full, not in his body, but in his heart. Around them, the students stared, their laughter replaced by silence. Some looked shocked, others inspired. They had just witnessed something unusual, a child giving away his only food without hesitation. The elderly couple sat at a nearby table, quietly sharing the meal. They ate slowly, savoring every bite as though it were the finest feast. Every now and then, they looked at Jamal with gratitude shining in their eyes. Jamal returned to his corner, sitting down with empty hands, but a quiet pride filling his chest. His stomach growled again, but he ignored it. For the rest of the lunch period, he simply watched the couple eat, and every time they smiled, it eased the ache inside him. As the bell rang and the cafeteria emptied, Jamal gathered his things. He didn't mention what had happened to anyone, not his friends, not even his mother. He didn't see it as an act of heroism, just the right thing to do. But little did he know, that simple act of kindness would ripple far beyond that cafeteria. What Jamal couldn't have imagined was that someone had been watching. A teacher standing near the doorway had seen everything: the sacrifice, the selflessness, the courage of a hungry boy giving away his only meal. And that teacher would tell the story to others. Word would spread, traveling farther than Jamal could ever have expected. But at that moment, Jamal wasn't thinking about the future. He was just a boy who had gone hungry so two strangers wouldn't have to. He walked home slowly, his belly empty but his heart heavy with a strange kind of fullness. That night, lying in bed, he thought again of the old man's words. "Bless you, son." Jamal didn't know what blessings meant for a boy like him, poor, overlooked, struggling day by day. But as sleep pulled him under, he held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, doing the right thing would someday come back to him in ways he couldn't yet see. And he was right. Because kindness, no matter how small, never disappears. It always finds its way back, often when you least expect it. When Jamal returned home that evening, the little apartment was dimly lit. The faint smell of detergent mixed with the aroma of reheated soup hung in the air. His mother, exhausted from her second shift, sat at the small kitchen table sorting through bills. She looked up the moment he walked in and immediately noticed his pale face. "Did you eat today?" she asked, concern threading her voice. Jamal hesitated. For a brief second, the truth sat heavy on his tongue. He wanted to tell her that he had given away his only meal to strangers, that his stomach was empty and aching. But then he saw the dark circles under her eyes, the lines of worry etched into her face. He knew how hard she worked, how often she skipped meals herself just to make sure he had something to eat. He couldn't add one more burden to her already heavy load, so he forced a small smile and nodded. "Yeah, Mom, don't worry." She studied him for a moment longer, as if sensing something was wrong, but she didn't press. Instead, she went back to the pile of bills, sighing quietly under her breath. Jamal slipped into his room, the walls bare except for a few hand-drawn sketches taped above his bed. He lay down, clutching his thin blanket around him as the day replayed in his mind. His belly twisted painfully with hunger, but he kept thinking about the old couple, the way the woman's eyes had filled with tears, the way the old man's voice had cracked when he whispered, "Bless you, son." The memory of their gratitude warmed him more than any meal could have. Hunger was sharp, but kindness was stronger. Slowly, his eyelids grew heavy, and he drifted off to sleep, not realizing that his small act of sacrifice had already set something extraordinary in motion, because someone had been watching. Earlier that day, a teacher standing near the cafeteria doors had seen the whole scene unfold. She had watched as Jamal pushed away his own hunger to feed two strangers, and the image had stayed with her long after lunch was over. That evening, she shared the story with a local community leader, a man who just so happened to be friends with a wealthy philanthropist in town. That philanthropist was Mr. Thompson, a retired businessman who had built his fortune from scratch. He was known for his generosity, but more than money, he valued character, honesty, humility, compassion. When he heard about Jamal's selflessness, his heart stirred. Here was a boy with almost nothing, yet he had given up the little he had for someone else. That kind of spirit, Mr. Thompson believed, deserved to be rewarded. The very next morning, while Jamal was still rubbing the sleep from his eyes and preparing for another long day at school, there was a knock at the door. His mother, startled, hurried to answer it. Standing there was a tall, well-dressed man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said warmly. "I'm looking for Jamal." Jamal peeked out from behind his mother, unsure. He didn't recognize the stranger, but something about him seemed safe. "I'm Mr. Thompson," the man explained. "I heard about what you did yesterday at the cafeteria, about how you gave your lunch to that elderly couple." Jamal's cheeks flushed. He hadn't told anyone, not even his mom. "How did you—" He started to ask, but Mr. Thompson raised a hand. "Kindness has a way of traveling," he said with a smile. "And when I heard about yours, I knew I had to meet you." His mother looked at Jamal in surprise, tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't known either. Jamal shifted uncomfortably, embarrassed by the attention. "It wasn't a big deal," he muttered. "They needed it more than me." Mr. Thompson's smile grew wider. "That's exactly why it is a big deal." Then, to Jamal's astonishment, Mr. Thompson reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Jamal," he said, his voice steady, "I run a foundation that helps kids with promise, kids who show strength of character and a heart for others. Starting today, I'd like to cover the cost of your meals at school. Not just for this week, but for as long as you need." Jamal's eyes widened, his hunger momentarily forgotten. He glanced at his mother, who had covered her mouth with trembling hands. "But Mr. Thompson wasn't finished. I also want to make sure you and your mom don't have to struggle so hard. There will be groceries delivered to your home every week, and if you're willing, I'd like to mentor you. I believe you have a bright future, Jamal, and I'd like to help you reach it." The room fell silent. For a moment, Jamal thought he was dreaming. He had gone to bed hungry, convinced no one noticed his sacrifice, and now here was a man offering him more than he could have imagined. Finally, Jamal whispered, "Why me?" Mr. Thompson crouched down so their eyes met. "Because the world needs more people like you, Jamal. People who give even when they have little. People who remind us all what kindness really means." Jamal swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. His mother pulled him into a hug, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in a long while, Jamal felt a weight lifting. The hunger, the worry, the endless struggle, it all seemed a little lighter now. That night, as he lay in bed once more, his stomach was finally full. But more than that, his heart overflowed with gratitude. He thought again of the elderly couple, of the way their eyes had lit up when he handed them his tray. He realized then that kindness is like a seed. You plant it without expecting anything in return, and sometimes it grows into something bigger than you ever imagined. Jamal didn't know what the future would hold. But he knew one thing for certain. The choice he made in that cafeteria had changed his life forever. And as sleep carried him away, he whispered a quiet promise to himself. No matter how much or how little he had, he would always choose kindness, because kindness, he now understood, has the power to change everything. The next morning, Jamal was pulling on his faded jacket, getting ready for school. The sun barely peeked through the thin curtains, casting stripes of light across the cramped apartment. His mother was packing what little she could for his lunch, a simple sandwich wrapped in wax paper, when a loud, firm knock echoed through their small home. Startled, she wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door. Standing there was a tall man in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. His shoes shined like mirrors, and his presence filled the doorway. He looked important, the kind of person you only saw on television or in magazines, not outside their modest apartment. "Good morning," the man said politely, his deep voice carrying warmth. "I'm looking for Jamal Carter." Jamal froze, his backpack slung over his shoulder. His name sounded strange coming from the lips of someone so polished. Slowly, he stepped forward. "That's me, sir." The man's serious expression softened into a smile. "My name is Charles Bennett. Perhaps you don't know me, but I know you." Jamal blinked, confused. You know me?" Mr. Bennett nodded. "Yes, yesterday I was at your school cafeteria. I was sitting quietly in the corner, unnoticed by most, and I saw what you did. I watched as you gave up your only meal to feed an elderly couple who had nothing." Jamal's heart raced. He hadn't thought anyone had seen. He looked down at his worn sneakers, suddenly shy. "It was nothing, sir. They needed it more than I did." But Mr. Bennett shook his head firmly. "It wasn't nothing. It was everything. You see, Jamal, I've spent my life building a business empire, competing, chasing profits, measuring success in dollars and deals. But when I watched you give away your meal with no hesitation, you reminded me of something I had forgotten: humanity. And that, young man, is priceless." Jamal's mother glanced between them, her eyes wide. "Sir, are you saying you were there? You saw my boy do that?" "Yes," Bennett replied, "and it touched me more than any contract or financial victory ever could, which is why I'm here." Jamal's throat went dry. "Why you're here?" he repeated nervously. Mr. Bennett reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out an envelope. He held it out to Jamal with both hands. "Because people like you deserve every opportunity to shine." With trembling fingers, Jamal opened the envelope. Inside was a crisp letter stamped with an official seal. He began to read aloud, his voice shaky. This says, full scholarship?" He looked up in shock. To Oakwood Academy?" his mother gasped. Oakwood was the city's most prestigious private school, a place they could never have dreamed of affording. Yes, Mr. Bennett confirmed. Tuition, books, uniforms, everything will be taken care of. I've also arranged for daily meals so you'll never have to go hungry again. Jamal felt his knees wobble. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. His mother burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Sir, we don't know how to thank you. Bennett smiled gently. Don't thank me. Thank Jamal. It was his heart, his sacrifice that brought me here today. But Jamal was still overwhelmed. Why me? There are so many kids who need help. Why would you choose me? Mr. Bennett crouched down so he was eye level with the boy. Because you gave when you had so little. That tells me you'll never forget where you came from. People with that kind of spirit can change the world, and I want to help you get there. For the first time, Jamal felt seen, not as a poor boy from a struggling family, but as someone with worth, someone with potential. Mr. Bennett wasn't finished. I'll also be visiting often, Jamal, not just to check in on your studies, but to mentor you. I want you to learn more than just what's in the textbooks. I want you to understand business, leadership, and the importance of giving back. Because one day, I believe you'll be in a position to help others, just as you helped that couple. Jamal's chest tightened. He thought of the old man's whispered blessing in the cafeteria, and now of this incredible opportunity. All from one simple act of kindness. His mother stepped forward, her voice trembling. Mr. Bennett, you don't know what this means to us. I've prayed every night for a chance like this for my boy. And now, because of you, she wiped her tears. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Bennett placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll support Jamal as he grows. Because I see something in him, a light this world needs. As Mr. Bennett left that morning, Jamal stood in the doorway clutching the scholarship letter. His world, which once felt so small, now stretched wide with possibility. That night, as he lay in bed, Jamal stared at the ceiling, his heart racing with excitement and disbelief. He thought of the cafeteria, of his rumbling stomach, of the old couple's grateful smiles. He realized something profound. One small act of kindness could ripple outward in ways he never imagined. The boy who gave up his meal had gained more than food in return. He had gained hope, opportunity, and the chance to rewrite his future. And as sleep pulled him into dreams, Jamal whispered to himself, one day I'll do the same for someone else, because kindness, he now understood, always comes back, sometimes when you least expect it, and sometimes in the form of a millionaire knocking on your door. The knock on the door that morning echoed through their tiny apartment like thunder. Jamal was just tying his worn shoelaces, ready to head out for another day at school, when his mother opened the door. Standing there wasn't a neighbor or the landlord. It was a man who looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. Tall, confident, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, he seemed completely out of place in their modest hallway. Good morning, the man said with a warm, polite tone. I'm looking for Jamal Carter. Jamal froze. His heart raced as he stepped forward. That's me, sir, the stranger smiled. My name is Charles Bennett. Perhaps you don't know me, but I know you. Jamal blinked in confusion. You know me? Mr. Bennett nodded. Yes. Yesterday I happened to be at your school cafeteria. I was seated quietly in the back corner when I saw something remarkable. I saw you give away your meal to an elderly couple who clearly hadn't eaten in days. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask for anything in return. That small act of kindness touched me deeply. Jamal's cheeks flushed, and he shifted nervously on his feet. His sneakers were frayed at the edges, the soles nearly worn through. He glanced down at them, too shy to meet the man's gaze. It was nothing, sir. They needed it more than I did, but Mr. Bennett shook his head firmly. No, Jamal, it wasn't nothing. It was everything. In a world where most people think only of themselves, you showed compassion. You reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten, what it means to be human. Then, slowly, Mr. Bennett reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He handed it to Jamal's mother, who looked puzzled. With trembling fingers, she slid it open. Her eyes widened as she read the words on the certificate inside. Her voice cracked. This is a scholarship. It says it covers Jamal's education through high school. And even college? Tears immediately welled up in her eyes. Her hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the paper. This must be some mistake. Things like this don't happen to families like ours. But Mr. Bennett's tone was steady, certain. There's no mistake. This is my gift to Jamal. He paused, then added softly, but that's not all. He gestured toward the street outside, where a sleek black car was parked. I also want to provide your family with support, groceries delivered every week, assistance with rent, and medical care whenever you need it. Because no child who shows such selflessness should ever go hungry again. Jamal's mouth fell open. Just last night, he had gone to bed with his stomach aching from hunger. He had given away his only meal of the day and drifted off to sleep, not knowing when he'd eat again. And now here he was, standing in his small living room, listening to a millionaire promise him a future he had only dared to dream about. His voice was barely a whisper. Why me? Mr. Bennett stepped closer, kneeling down so he was eye to eye with the boy. His expression was serious, yet kind. Because the world needs more people like you, Jamal. People who remind us that kindness is more valuable than money, and that even the smallest sacrifice can inspire greatness. Jamal's mother pressed the scholarship certificate to her chest, sobbing with joy. She had spent years worrying about how to keep her son fed, how to pay the bills, how to give him even the slightest chance at a better life. And now, all of those fears seemed to melt away in an instant. For the first time in a long time, Jamal felt hope rise inside him like a sunrise. He wasn't just the poor kid with worn-out shoes anymore. He was someone who mattered, someone whose kindness had been seen and rewarded. Mr. Bennett straightened his suit jacket and smiled again. I'll have my assistant come by later today to work out all the details. But Jamal, I want you to remember something. What you did yesterday, it wasn't about the food. It was about the heart behind the gesture. That is what makes you extraordinary. Never lose that. Jamal nodded, still overwhelmed. I won't, sir. I promise. As Mr. Bennett turned to leave, he placed a gentle hand on Jamal's shoulder. One day you'll be in a position to help others too. And when that day comes, I know you'll do the right thing. When the door finally closed, Jamal's mother hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. For Jamal, the ache of hunger was long gone. In its place was a fullness that no meal could provide, the fullness of knowing that kindness could change lives, starting with his own. News of Jamal's story spread like wildfire. At first it was just whispers in the school cafeteria. Kids who had seen him hand over his tray to the frail old couple told their friends, who then told their parents. Within days, neighbors who had once walked past Jamal's family with pity now looked at them with newfound respect. They no longer saw Jamal as just the poor boy from down the hall. They saw him as someone special, someone with a heart big enough to inspire an entire community. At school, the reaction was even louder. When Jamal walked down the hallway, students clapped him on the back and smiled at him with admiration. Teachers who had once worried about his grades now looked at him differently. He wasn't just another struggling student anymore. He was a symbol of compassion. Even the cafeteria workers, who had witnessed the moment firsthand, made sure Jamal never left without a meal again. A week later, the elderly couple Jamal had helped returned to the school. They weren't empty-handed this time. Each of them carried a basket filled with fresh food, apples, bread, cheese, even homemade soup. They had scraped together what little they had to show their gratitude. The cafeteria went silent as they walked straight to Jamal. The old man placed the basket on the table in front of him and said with tears in his eyes, "You gave to us when you had nothing to spare. Today we give back to you with all we can." Jamal's eyes stung with tears. For the first time, he realized that kindness really did come full circle, but life didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. There were still challenges. His mother still worked long hours and money didn't stop being tight overnight. There were bills to pay, moments of uncertainty, and the weight of responsibility that came with being given such a rare gift from Mr. Bennett. Jamal knew he had to prove he was worthy of the opportunity. He studied harder, pushed himself in school, and poured his energy into becoming the best version of himself. What made the difference was that he no longer felt alone. With Mr. Bennett's support, his mother's encouragement, and now the entire community rooting for him, Jamal began to walk taller. His shoulders straightened, his steps grew lighter, and his dreams expanded. No longer did he think only about surviving each day. He began to imagine a future, a real future, where he could make a difference. Years passed, and Jamal grew into a young man with a strong sense of purpose. He excelled in school, earning top grades and respect from his peers. The scholarship Mr. Bennett had given him carried him through high school and into college, where Jamal pursued studies in social work and community development. His goal was simple but powerful: to give back, just as he had once given away his meal in that cafeteria. Every milestone he reached, Jamal thought back to that single day. The cafeteria, the hungry couple, the choice he made in an instant. It was such a small act on the surface, one plate of food given away, but it had changed the entire direction of his life. That moment had opened doors he never thought possible, doors that led to education, stability, and hope. The story of his sacrifice continued to follow him. Local newspapers picked it up, then regional news outlets, and eventually national media. Jamal didn't like the spotlight, but he realized the story wasn't really about him. It was about the power of kindness. Every time someone shared it, they weren't just talking about Jamal. They were reminding the world that compassion still mattered. When people asked him about it years later, Jamal always smiled before answering. It wasn't about the food, he would say. It was about seeing someone in need and choosing to help. Kindness is never wasted. It always comes back, sometimes when you least expect it. And he lived by those words. As an adult, Jamal started his own community foundation, providing meals, scholarships, and mentorship to children growing up in poverty. He often visited schools, standing in cafeterias much like the one where his story had begun, telling students about the day he gave away his lunch. His message was always the same. One small act of kindness can change your life and someone else's forever. The elderly couple he had once helped became lifelong friends of the family. Every Thanksgiving, they sat at Jamal's table, laughing and sharing stories. Mr. Bennett, too, remained in Jamal's life, not just as a benefactor, but as a mentor and guide. Looking back, Jamal understood the true miracle wasn't the scholarship or the financial help. It was the chain reaction that one choice had set in motion. His hunger that day had been temporary, but the lesson he learned was permanent. The world notices kindness, and kindness multiplies. For the boy who once sat quietly in the corner of a cafeteria, that single moment of sacrifice had become the turning point of his life. And for everyone who heard his story, it became a reminder that the smallest gestures often carry the greatest power. Because in the end, Jamal knew one truth better than anyone. Kindness always comes back, sometimes when you least expect it, and sometimes in ways far greater than you could ever imagine.